Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to yet another edition of the Lambom Show. Today is Monday, July 26th, 2021. And for those who are Catholics, we are celebrating the feast of Saints Joachim and Anna, the grandparents of Jesus. That's a conversation for another day. Monday shows, we always come up with, we are dealing with relationships. So we continue with our Monday discussions, conversations on relationships. So we want to focus today on something which is quite interesting: compatibility. What does it mean to be compatible? Very often we hear people say, "Oh, we are just not compatible." What does it mean to be compatible? What do people mean when they say we are just not compatible? When do people realize that they are just not compatible? And in this modern world, people are now glued to the horoscope. You hear people ask you, are you a Leo? Are you Scorpio? What are you? What does the horoscope say about you? So again, the classifications of people based on when they are born, an indication that the stars are lined up for you in such a way that based on what the position of the stars at the time you were born, you are supposed to relate only with a particular group of people in order to succeed. But what does this in fact mean? Compatibility. When you say you are not compatible with somebody, what does that mean? Is that even possible? We talk about it every day, and I wonder whether men actually talk about compatibility. Do men actually say they are not compatible? Or is it something that comes from the other side? What do we mean? Are our relationships failing? Are marriages breaking up because people are not compatible? What is the problem? And as always, welcome, BK.
Hi, Lambert. For now, I've got a dark screen. I'm not sure if you can see me, let alone hear me. I'm just waiting for my screen to render.
Okay,
brilliant.
At least, yeah, I can see you, I can hear you. And I'm sure everybody who's watching can see and watch you and hear you. How was the weekend?
The weekend was great. I made it everything I wanted it to be, so I can't complain.
Good. So last week we went over. I really want us to start off because I think the analogy that you made is about the one size fits all. The analogy of the hat and the string is important because I keep getting people calling me to say that we are generalizing. It's not as if this works for everybody, isn't it? And I don't think that that's what we are saying here. That is not the case. There are certain fundamental principles. How they apply in every situation is going to be different. But we are talking here, again, I want to clarify, we are looking at it from a man's perspective. We realize our audience, mainly women who at least are always live, but again, there are men who come on. Generally, that is what we talk about. How this applies to you as an individual, you need to do the introspection. You need to take what we are doing here, see how it applies to you and how you can work on it. So let's get back to the analogy that you used last week. One size fits all, or the hat and the strings that you do in to make it to adjust. Then let's come back to what we want to do today. We really want to focus on compatibility because it's something that I hear it every day. People talk about it and they just say the reason this thing is not moving is because we are not compatible. And we don't hear it before they get married or before they get to the relationship. It's always down the road. People discover compatibility. They're not compatible only down the road. So welcome.
Thank you, Lambert. It's always a pleasure to be here. And this is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. So, sure, let's dig in. Let's chew some fat on and around this. One cap fits all. Notice we did not say one size fits all. So, what does that really mean? I'm sure we would agree that by and large, we're talking about love. Because life is really all about love and light. Life's about our ability to show up. Life's about our ability to express who we are, the way we are, not the way we want to be seen, not the way we want to be accepted, not the way we wish to be understood, because then we're showing up as something else. And when we get put to task, when we get held to ransom to be that person that we showed up as, we realize we were not really that person we're putting up a front. And why do we usually typically put up a front? Because we think that's who we need to be in order to be accepted. We forget that there comes a time when we will be tired of acting. We will be tired of our role. It becomes redundant. And then the real us shows up. And that is when we start having conversations such as, oh, now you're showing me your true colors. I didn't see this before. I get to meet the gremlins. I get to meet the demons. You were pretending all along. No, nobody really pretends. We get to show the best of who we are when we are desperate or when we have something that we are in pursuit of. So let's come back again to this whole one cap fits all. We've talked about the things that matter to you, the things that matter to me. They will be the same. We want to be safe, we want to be secure, and we want to be comfortable. Show me one person out there who doesn't want all three of these, and I'll show you one who possibly needs a psych evaluation. We want to relax, we want to go out into the world, we want to engage, we want to exploit, we want to explore. Again, show me one person who doesn't want to do any of this or all of these, and I'll show you one person who's deeply insecure, who's fearful. And that's where we all start, by being afraid. And where does this fear come from? It comes from our experiences, the road we have traveled. Sometimes it is the road less traveled. And if it's a painful one, then we go through life trying to avoid the pain that we experienced in the past. And this usually is a recipe for disaster. It grows our demise because we end up in a trap. We end up in a rut, the hamster wheel. See, because we don't live life for what it is we aspire towards. We live life for all the things we want to avoid. So on our road, we're looking for all those signposts that say danger so we can avoid them. And the trouble is, when we avoid danger, all we're doing is moving towards danger instead of moving towards our destination, because it's not everything that looks like danger that is danger. That was just an intro. I'd like you to chime in, especially if we've got guests, because I'd love today particularly to be an interactive session so we can deal with questions as they come up, so no one leaves with a misconception thinking they've heard something they've not heard, not necessarily deconstruct. I can see
So I
you.
want to welcome those who are just joining us. If you are just joining, you're on the Lambom Show, and today we are talking about compatibility in relationships. What does that actually mean? And this means different things to different people. It seems to be the easiest way out for many relationships. When they are not moving, people think that it is because they are not compatible. But what does that actually mean? What does it mean to be compatible? And I hear you, BK. We all need the same thing: security, safety. We want to be comfortable, isn't it? We want to relax. Generally,
we didn't go through the full gambit of needs. I mean, we equally want to feel significant. We want to feel heard. We want to be acknowledged. We want to love. We want to be loved. We want to connect, and we want to relate and engage, learn and give and contribute, make a difference. So we all have these in common. So sorry, I just had to throw that in.
Great. So I mean, I was just taking those randomly because of what you said, and I'm like, so if we all need these things, it is not everybody that can give this to us. Okay. Now, is it the case that we need the other person to be able to provide those, because then it becomes an issue where we are incomplete without other people?
That's an amazing question, Lambert. It brings us right back to the question of purpose and then identity. When we are looking, and this is where I love the French expression combler le vide. When we're looking for the rest of us in someone else, and we hope that that person will be that which we can't be for ourselves, that's when we start having problems. So when two people get into a relationship, and okay, we're talking about compatibility, I'm just trying to figure out what angle to approach or to broach the subject from. So you have, I was listening to this lady, I can't remember what her name is, but she coins it very nicely. So you have two people who are incompatible. You can have two people who are completely incompatible. You can have a relationship where one person is compatible, but the other person is not. And she did it in a picturesque way, which was amazing. Take the square and a circle. So you have a circle that can fit perfectly within a square. But if you look at the square, it has edges that are hanging on the on the on the well on the fringes.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no overlap. What does that mean? If the woman or the man, if one of the, if one entity in the relationship is the circle, then you realize that that circle fits completely within this square. So all its needs are met. But for the square, it's not exactly the same thing. Can you see that picture?
Absolutely.
So the square will have areas, needs that will not be met. And there it will be difficult to have a conversation because for the circle, it feels it is fulfilled in that relationship. It is giving all it can give, and it is getting everything that it needs. So if all its needs are met, it takes a lot of maturity for the square to be able to guide and to stretch that circle to be able to a place where the circle can then begin to meet the needs that are unmet by the square. So that is a scenario where one person is compatible and the other person is not. So you would always hear things like one person loves more than the other. No, I think it's not balanced. So you hear expressions like it's not a balanced relationship. I love them more than they love me. Why would you love someone more than they love you? Because they meet all their needs, but you do not meet all of their own, or you don't meet all their needs. So we create a conflict, and that conflict is not always obvious because it's not clear cut. And then you start hearing expressions like, "Oh, it just doesn't fit. It just something is missing, something is lacking. It just doesn't work. I mean, I can't put a finger to it, but something's just not working." It doesn't help, of course, when we come into a relationship from previous relationships and we have in our subconscious mind flashbacks and movies of all these other people we were engaged in relationships with who met and fulfilled these needs that the person we are in a relationship today with is not meeting. You know how it is. It's a lot easier for us to ignore what we have right here and miss that which we used to have and no longer have today. We blow it out of proportion. We give it a meaning it never really had in our lives. And that is what we hang on to. Then we start missing it. Oh, I had this thing. And you don't look at the things that you currently have in your relationship. So that would be
So,
one of the reasons two people would think they were incompatible. And incompatibility in my world simply means one thing: I don't care enough about your needs to want to do something about them. Lots of people will differ with me and they will say, oh, well, different people are wired differently. And somebody could just be wired in a completely different way, which is perfectly fine. See, the universe has orchestrated life in such a way that you don't need to meet and or fulfill all my needs. Now, if you and I are hanging out together and you don't meet any of my needs, then it begs the question, beggars belief, how did we get together?
right. So let's circle back. I want to take
Sure.
the example you used about the circle and the square.
Let's go.
So right there, in somebody's mind, that is incompatibility, isn't it? One would think that there is no way those two can come together. But I think what the relationship is supposed to do is enable the square to become a circle and the square and the circle to become a square in a certain fashion. What do I mean? So in the sense of pulling each other towards each other so that the things that I lack, I'm able to find in you, and the things that you lack, you're able to find in me. That is when it is a journey, isn't it? It is not just about meeting needs because it becomes a form of mutual exploitation.
Do I chime in here?
No,
Or
absolutely. Yes.
I like the way you put it. Somebody would describe that as incompatibility. Those are the kinds of people I like to talk to. See, because you can either see incompatibility or you can see opportunity. Where is the opportunity? If I meet your needs in every way, shape, and or form, and there was a time when we were compatible, to use the word, there was a time when we got along pretty well. Notice that the areas, mind, so those needs of mine that you can't need are an opportunity for both of us to explore something new.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's communication, and that person who feels fulfilled truly loves the other, then they have an opportunity to grow. Because the one thing I'm sure you and I would agree on is that we are never satisfied, ever. It doesn't matter what we have got, we will always want more. The only thing that will make us ring fence ourselves, the only thing that will make us want to stay in a particular place is that need for certainty and insecurity. So the need for certainty ultimately, invariably, and inevitably will breed an insecurity. See, because we need to venture into the unknown in order to grow and expand. And it is in the process of growing and expanding that we get to discover who we really are on the inside. We get to meet, greet, define, and refine that tool that we are. And until we do that, we don't really live. And if we do, we don't live to the full. So it is for this reason that I would describe incompatibility as a form of security. I'm sure you would agree with me that if you have two people, any random two people, they get into a relationship. They may get into that relationship for all the wrong reasons. And that will very soon become evident. If I'm looking for security by dating the person that I date, and they're looking for security by dating me. Guess what? We have two insecure people looking for security from one another or from each other. If you ask me, that is the perfect combination because it forces these two people to look back in themselves. Why? They will bring out their worst selves. They will bring out all the weaknesses within each other. And I guess in many ways, that's why they'll tell you people come into your life for different reasons, some for a season and some for a lifetime. Woe betides us if we decide to settle for someone who is a passerby, who is a passenger, whom we're supposed to carry for a certain time and then move along. Otherwise, they will slow us down. So yes, from that particular regard, there can be something as two people who are incompatible. But then it just means that one or both of them do not have the willingness to grow and to expand and to become the best and everything that they could be with the resources that they have. It gets worse because it can be so convoluted and so twisted. When we bring our baggage into a relationship, our baggage being cycles that we've repeated in the past, that which we know, use and abuse that we've experienced in the past, gotten so used to, the devil we know. And it becomes comfortable in so many ways because it gives us an excuse to be that which we are, which doesn't serve us. But at least we can always flash it and brand it and say, oh, poor me. This is why my life is not going right. I have an alibi. And if I were to take away all those alibis, then you have no reason for your life not to go right. So tell me, why would you want to give up any of that? You would stay in that relationship and talk about incompatibility. Oh, we're just not compatible. Oh, if I could, I would leave. It's just the kids or some other fictitious reason. The real thing is you don't want to grow. One or both parties do not wish to grow. One or both parties are or feel insecure in that relationship. And if those two people again, see, we keep coming back to the exact same conversation. If they can find themselves in a place where they are truly vulnerable and they can be open to each other, see, that openness is what bursts them open to a point where they are ready to explore. Vulnerability will make you discover things about yourself that you didn't even know you had. It will touch you in places, take you places you didn't think you could go, affect you and touch you and light you up in ways you didn't think were possible. But for that to happen, we need to be vulnerable. And that is why I keep saying your vulnerability is your strength. And the question is, can you be vulnerable? Yes. I mean you. When was the last time you were vulnerable? When is the last time you didn't think crying was a weakness? Do you know what happens when you actually cry? Wouldn't you agree with me that when you cry, you feel a tad bit better than when you were in anguish, pain, when you were stressed, in distress and under duress, when you were angry, scornful, bitter, frustrated? Then you curled up and you gave yourself, you had a good cry. How did you feel after that? That is the question I'd love for you to answer.
So again, I think you touched on something which is, call it intrinsic to the question of compatibility, and that has to do with values.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I think our belief systems, our values, and I want to circle back to something you said originally before I come back to that, which is the fundamental is about when you get into a relationship. Getting into a relationship presupposes already a form of compatibility. There's something that brings you together.
Yes.
That's something, and which is something you talked about also could be a wrong reason. But then there's originally something that attracts, brings you together, and the reason for that may be just, again, something else. But fundamentally, once there's that initial attraction, the thing that needs to sustain it then becomes the values and all that, I presume. And that is where we start going, we forget about that initial stage. And I like, because I don't think two people just bump into each other and then that's it, isn't it? There's some attraction. But how that fizzles out gradually is how we nurture, we nourish that initial thing. And I think that's the problem. That's the problem we have with the compatibility question. You want to come in there?
Absolutely. So again, we go right back to energy, because remember what we say, what we keep saying. Nothing means anything until we give it meaning. So when we talk about, so imagine these two people who've discovered something that they have in common. So in each other's presence, they flow. And when they start flowing, they glow. And in that glow, they grow. What happens? You would notice that if only they would focus on those things that brought them together, then they would realize that the areas they have in common will start, the things they have in common will start expanding. And when they expand at the expense of their differences. So coming together initially is an opportunity to connect and then to start building synergies. If they are actually building these synergies and taking these synergies in the right direction, they will learn to appreciate and celebrate their differences, because their differences become their strengths. We've talked about the left hand and the right hand. We talk about it all the time. When I bring these two together, what they can do together is by far many times more than what each one can do on its own. I'm sure we all agree, don't we? So when you bring this left hand and the right hand, remember, at face value, they look alike. They both have digits, but they're not, and they are mirror images of each other. So you cannot superimpose them. So typically you have got two strangers looking at each other. If they focus on their differences, all they want to do is move apart, run away. But if they focus on the attraction, because opposites will always attract, and that is why people who are incompatible will attract. Those are the best bed mates. And by bed mates, I'm not talking about sex here. I'm talking about relationships, partnerships. Because why? They complement each other. It's only when we get past the part where we see complementarity to the point where our differences become threats. And that is where the word incompatibility kicks in.
Very important point. Because I think what people mean by compatibility is the fact that they are looking for themselves in the other person. They are looking for the same thing in the other person, which is a problem.
Yes.
The things he likes are not the things that I like. The things, again, that becomes an issue.
It becomes an issue. And what's more, Lambert, it's more an issue because it is a lie, a bold-faced lie. No disrespect to anybody who has ever made that statement. I will deconstruct so you realize this is coming from a place of love yet again. When you say the things that he likes, I don't like, that is generalization. And that's the way life works. In life, what do? We delete, we distort, we generalize. When we've come to a place, so basically we will make a general statement which doesn't really reflect the truth. It just reflects what it is we're focusing on at that particular point in time. That one particular thing I would love to do with you that you're not interested in. I blow it out of proportion, do my drama thing around it, throw all my toys out of the pram because that's the only way I can get your attention. Now, the problem is the first time I say it, I know it's an exaggeration. When I repeat it enough, it becomes my reality. I start believing it. The worst thing that we can do to ourselves is when we get to that place in that headspace where we start believing in our own propaganda. And that is the root cause of so many problems because you have this person making this general statement, this generic statement, and yet they've been in a relationship with this young man or the young lady for 3, 4 years. It took you 3, 4 years to realize that everything you like, he doesn't like, or everything you like, she doesn't like. I'm sure you would agree with me that is a bold-faced lie. It just so happens that energy is thought, and thought and energy follows thought. Where your thoughts go, energy will flow. And that is what you will see. That is what will become your reality. That is what you will magnify. And that is what you will live. It will become your experience.
Dr. Minang, interesting topic, our discussion today. Welcome, Dr. Minang. Maria Gorotti, welcome. Divine says, sorry I came in late. In terms of what do you define incompatibility? Ninangwa, welcome. Gerard, full greetings. Father Morris, flow, grow, glow. I like that. So let's get back to Divine's question because I think, welcome, Karen. Karen says, hello, guys. In terms of what do you define incompatibility? Again, I'm sure we had this earlier on. But I believe, again, when we talk about the energy, we come together with all that, and we want to focus on the things that we think are similar. And we are saying that, no, the differences are important, isn't it? But it's how we look at the differences that is going to define the relationship. And again, I like the fact you said we believe in our own propaganda. So when the relationship starts, problems start coming up, that is when people start saying, I don't see how I'm going to sustain this. It's not sustainable. And I want to throw in one other thing, because it's not just propaganda. It's because one person thinks that, okay, I realize this, but I'm giving this person time to change. So it's like, it's not an exercise in growth. I have come in with my own mindset, and I want this person to fit my mindset, and so I'm going to give the person to the time to grow to suit my mindset. It is not about the growth process where all of us are sharing and contributing to each other. It is always, in the words of the famous French philosopher, hell is the other person. Recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. So let's just touch on Divine's question. So yes, Divine. In what terms do we define incompatibility? Let me start by saying that the word in and of itself means absolutely nothing. So we started off at some point and we said things only have the meanings that we assign them. In this case, incompatibility as a word, all standing on its own, in and of itself, is a figment of our imagination. Why do I say so? If you were to gather 10 people in a room who were complaining about incompatibility, and you asked them what they meant, I'm sure you would get at least 12 different reasons or 12 different definitions. So we all use it to suit our whims and caprices and the insanity of what it is we choose to believe in a particular situation or set of circumstances. Let me deconstruct that once again. So we looked at different scenarios. I'll just do a quick summary for you, Divine, and for those who may have joined us late, so we catch up and then we can take it from there. So you can have two people who are completely incompatible. Why? In this case, well, what would be the example? You have two insecure people who are looking for security in each other. So that's a recipe for disaster. They will bring out the worst in each other. And obviously, the good thing in that is that may force them to look deep within and to find themselves, to find self. And it's only when they find self and realize that they need to follow the growth cycle, which is you move from a place of dependency to a place of independency. and then to a place of interdependency. Some people move into a relationship and they are totally dependent. They may not show it. They show a different side of who they are, macho, strong, and all, when really they're looking for security in and through the other person. After a while, that veneer of strength and valor and presence and all will fade into the deep recesses of a distant past, and their real selves will come up. But how does that show up? It shows up again as oppression. It shows up again as control, because they're trying to hide the vulnerable person that they are on the inside. So they put up a false show of strength in a bid to control the other person, so that person can be everything and anything and everything they want them to be. Rest before disaster. Then we looked at the second scenario where one person is compatible, the other person is not. We used the example of the circle and the square. So you've got this circle that can fit very nicely within the square. So if I just do a quick schematic, so we can see what we are talking about. So you have a square like and we have a circle in it. Can we all see that? Lambert, can you see that? Lambert, are you still there?
Yes, sure. Sorry, my mic was
brilliant.
muted.
Yeah. Can you confirm that the diagram I put out there was visible?
Yes, it was. Yes. Great.
So notice that when you look at this circle, it fits very nicely within the square. But when you look at the square, it has got all these edges which would be incompatible with this circle, so to speak. So, and the incompatibility will be from the perspective of the square. Their needs in those areas will not be met. It can be a problem. They can call it an incompatibility, or they can see it as an opportunity. So notice it's the same word. It just changes its meaning. It changes as we change focus. If it is two people who are really growth oriented, who have a growth mindset, then those areas, those edges become an opportunity for the other person to grow and expand. And it becomes an opportunity for the person who has got those other edges, because those will be abilities, capabilities, gifts, and talents that they can lead to actually help empower, enlighten, and eventually help self-actualize the person they are in a relationship with. We equally identified the fact that we are never satisfied with what we have got, because growth is a continuous process until we become the concept of love, the total embodiment of what we call love, which is what? Patience, ability to give and forgive, ability to interact, engage, and heal in the process, unlock, unblock, cause trapped energy to resolve itself in the other person. That is what true love is. That is what true light is. And I'm sure we would agree that it's a place that is hard to get unless we are ready and willing to push ourselves and to strive in a certain direction. And that direction is growth and flow, where we come into a conversation and we leave that conversation by far better than we met it. And we come out of that conversation more enlightened and more fulfilled than we were when we got in. That's where we become the leader as we interact and we engage in these relationships. That is where we get built. We've talked about it time and time again. I do not exist until I start engaging with you, because you will bring out my strengths and my weaknesses. So my identity will be defined by you. In fact, what I say is, you are that part of me that exists outside of me. And without you, I'm absolutely nothing. So if two people were to come into a relationship with this mindset, help me, divine, why would they ever have to talk about incompatibility? Because the only reason these two people come together in the first place is because they would have identified certain areas where they are congruent, certain areas where they overlap, And if you can focus on something that you have in common, it doesn't matter how small that thing is. Focus on that, work on it, it will grow, it'll expand. So thought is energy. Energy follows
Thought.
thought. What you think about, energy flows. Where your thoughts go, energy will flow. And where energy goes, it amplifies whatever it is you're dealing with. And it is as simple and as complicated as that. Yes, Lambert.
I want to welcome Simon. Simon Atta. Enjoying you guys is very teaching. How do you look at a relationship that has been for 20 to 25 years and incompatibility comes in?
Brilliant. So again, let's go back to that word. See, I love this, Simon, because again, you have two people who are using a word, using and abusing the word. See, because 20, 25 years, incompatibility typically should not come in. What all they're pretty much saying is, that was my daughter.
Brilliant.
All they're really saying is, and so this is the picture. Let's deconstruct it. You have two people who have been in a relationship over a prorated period. As we already identified, nobody stays the same. So the one thing that is constant in any situation, relationship, situationship, staycationship, the one thing that is going to be a constant is change. People will evolve. Their needs will move. They will shift. They will develop different interests. They will drop old interests, pick up new ones. They will explore. They will grow. And as they grow, obviously, they will look for different engagements, activities, and the like. And it is off the back of these activities that they will find their new selves, because these activities and experiences will bring with them new challenges. And these challenges will mean there are certain things they used to be interested in that are of no good, of no use to them anymore. Sure, we would all agree milk is not something that we take today as adults. We only do if we're drinking tea. Whereas as a baby, that is your main, that's your staple food. That's what you get morning, noon, and night, 24/7. But you get to a certain place and milk doesn't really rock your boat anymore. It doesn't keep you afloat. You need to move on to bigger things. You need to move on to greater and to grander things. Now, if someone is trying to force you milk, you will choke on it because it is definitely not the thing that will meet your needs. So, incompatibility after 20, 25 years is you have one person who's stagnating or who's growing in a different direction, or both people growing and going in different directions. So what's the problem there? The problem of communication. It's not a problem of incompatibility. It is a problem of communication because one person thinks the other person should be going in their direction. Oh, well, we always did it your way. Now let's do it my way. There's no reason to do it your way. If you've both decided where you're going and you know why you're going there, then the way that is most optimal, most efficient is the path that you want to take. And the person who's more gifted in a particular area is the one who should typically be running the show in that department. When ego kicks in, oh, we did it your way the last time, why don't we do it my way this time? That is no reason to do it your way, sweetheart. If it's going to be a recipe for disaster, if it's just going to be a plane crash, why crash for the fun of it just because we want to give you the rudder? Is the question you want to be asking. So all I'm hearing in this case is you have one person who's attention seeking, who doesn't feel like their needs are being met. And because they feel vulnerable, so again, we will hide behind the veneer of incompatibility to express our vulnerability. So instead of me saying, you don't listen to me anymore, I'd rather say, we are incompatible, because that way it doesn't look like I need you. It doesn't feel like I'm vulnerable and I don't feel insecure. I can hide behind that nice big word. We're just incompatible. Then we'll talk about incompatibility all day long, and he will show her how compatible they are, and she will give him examples of incompatibilities that they had 6 million years ago or earlier, and then that conversation goes back and forth because they're dealing with the wrong thing instead of dealing with the real issue, which is lack of communication. One person feels hurt, one person doesn't feel like they're getting the attention that they need and so badly want, and but because they can't trust themselves to be vulnerable anymore, they would use other things. They throw all their toys out of the pram, and you think the problem is the pram or the toys, whereas the issue is someplace else. Does that answer the question, Simon?
You said it all. Communication is a key word. So I picked up this from this from a friend on a different forum, responding to the ad when I put it out. He said, compatible, in my opinion, means that two people are able to agree on a middle ground in a relationship. It doesn't mean agreeing on everything. Take the example of a bolt and a screw. They are only compatible because a screw can comfortably get into a bolt. That's compatibility, in my opinion.
So, what do we say to this?
So again, where I have a problem with it is the famous analogy of a square peg in a square hole, isn't it? And if you take what we just said earlier on, is this doesn't fit in that sense, because a bolt and a screw, well, in a certain sense, are you talking of what kind of a bolt? Not all screws will take all kinds of bolts, isn't it? Again, all kinds of things are going on there. I just believe that you don't have these hard and fast rules. You just gave a perfect scenario. What people are calling incompatibility is the inability to deal with the situation that they're finding in front of them. And so they are running away from a particular thing and addressing it as incompatibility. When if they could sit down and talk about it, they'll see that it's not about it's not about that, isn't it? Oh, we did it last time your way, let's do it my way. Now that it's not it's not a mathematical equation where x plus y would always give you the same answer all the time, isn't it? Because it was x last time, let's do y now. But
absolutely.
Go ahead.
So, compatibility, in my opinion, means that two people are able to agree on a middle ground in a relationship. I will grant him that. At the same time, it's a double-edged sword. It is extremely dangerous when we talk about middle ground. I always give the example of a cake, and I use it to articulate values. So we all agree that if you're going to bake a cake, there's flour, there are eggs, your baking powder, baking soda, yeast, so to speak. What else? There's butter. You do your mixture, you put it in the oven, and you wait for it to bake, to cook, until it is ready, fully ready. Then you take it out, and you can decide on whether or not you want icing on that cake. And if you're going to have icing, you can decide on the color of the icing. All right? Now, when we talk about middle ground, there are certain things we can discuss. There are certain things that are up for discussion, and there are other things that are just not up for discussion. If, for instance, we'll bake that cake, it's come out and it's nice, squeaky clean, tasty, succulent, and it's, oh my goodness. And we have a debate. Are we going to have icing or not? Now, if the debate is about having or not having icing on the cake, of course I'd compromise, because when you talk about middle ground, we're talking about compromise, right? But why am I compromising? The icing doesn't change the cake. It doesn't change the taste of the cake. It doesn't change the flavor of the cake. If I don't like icing, I'll simply take it out. So it's neither here nor there. In fact, icing or no icing, I'm not particularly fussed. I may have a preference, but I'm not fussed. We're not going to split hairs over that. What's still the color of the icing? Black, blue, pink, green, indigo, or all the colors of the rainbow. Again, what difference does it make? It's just presentation. Yeah, if it's appealing, that'd be great. But hey, if that floats your boat, why not? Do whatever it is you want to do with it. But if you're going to say, why don't we, instead of putting sugar, put salt? I'm sure you would agree with me. There's no conversation to be had there. If it is cake we're baking, worse still, you say, hey, why don't we bake it, instead of baking it for an hour or so, so it is fully ready, let's bake it halfway and serve it that way. I'm sure again you would agree with me. There is no conversation to be had there. There are no compromises to be had. None whatsoever. If you're going to compromise on nice to haves, that's a conversation we can have. If we're going to compromise on values, am I going to be loving? Am I going to be forgiving? Am I going to be respectful? Am I going to be patient? We don't have a conversation around those areas. It's going to be those things. Un point, un trait, il n'y a pas de discussion. So that is where I would say, yes, middle ground is important and it is paramount as long as you understand that there are certain boundaries you don't want to go beyond. And these boundaries are anything that touches on values. Anything that if you do makes you less of a person than you otherwise would have been if everything had been hunky-dory. So it says he then goes on to say it doesn't mean agreeing on everything. I like that statement. For me, an ideal relationship is one where two people can agree on everything. Because if two people don't agree on something, it simply means that communication has not been had. You can't have something that is both right or wrong. You can't have something that will both advance and the truth remains the truth. Gravity is gravity, whether you believe in it or not. Go jump off a cliff and you will soon find out. It'll act on you. It doesn't matter whether or not you believe in it. So if you've not put your finger on the truth and you say you will agree to disagree, that's the sort of thing you want to do with a Kumpel, as the German would say, with a friend, with someone who's just passing. Okay, it doesn't really change a whole lot. But if you're dealing with a life partner, someone you're going to spend the rest of your life with, someone you're going to go on projects with, someone you're going to do things with, your bed partner, you would hold them hand in hand. You walk hand in hand. I can't afford the luxury of not agreeing on everything that is important. If it's not important, then that's different, which means it's neither here nor there. It doesn't really matter. And why do I say it's of paramount importance? If somebody doesn't agree, if you don't agree on some things that are key, downstream, these will escalate into problems. When you come to a place and a headspace where you need to collaborate in that particular area to take an important project from point A to point B, you will then have to have the same conversation. And so all you would have done is postpone a potential argument or postpone that which could have been dealt with in a safe environment. Because if you're just talking about something and there's nothing at stake, I'm sure you'd agree with me that it's a whole lot easier for you to be level-headed. I look at your point of view, I flip it on all its sides, I poke it for validity, and we grow. So we exchange energies again and we build synergy. I don't come into that conversation because I'm looking to win. I don't come because I'm looking to change you or to change your mind. I come because I'm open to learning. And if you can give me something that is better than what I currently hold and believe to be true, then I'll give up whatever it is I was holding on to and adopt that which you brought forth. In my opinion, that is what a conversation really is. So yes, between my spouse and I, we need to agree on everything, especially if those things are important. Because if she's seeing something that I'm not seeing, it means there's an opportunity there for her to educate me and to help me grow. why would I want to shut my mind to it? Just as there could be an opportunity for me to enlighten her. So why don't we thrash it out and actually come to a point where we realize she had one piece of the puzzle, I had the other piece of the puzzle. She doesn't need to let go of whatever it is she saw. I don't need to let go of whatever it is I saw, because in effect, the truth or perspective is about bringing what she saw and lacing it with what I saw. Otherwise, we have got her point of view and my point of view, which is what perception is all about. So, if you look at the guitar behind me, that is, so if you perceive it from that angle, you will see something, you will see one thing. If I flip it on its side, or flip it 180 degrees, you see something else. That is the same guitar. That's what I say the difference is in perception. One person is looking at it from the front, the other person is looking at it from the back. I know that in the dictionary, perspective is defined differently. But whenever I use perspective, what I mean is the front view and the back view. So that 360-degree view is what gives something perspective. Its full definition. So that is why I would always come back to this whole conversation. No, we need to agree on everything, because there is something you're seeing that I am not seeing. And I can't discount that which you see just because I don't see it. I need to be able to reach out and say, yeah, I didn't see that. I can't see what you're seeing. Just explain it to me. Teach me. What is it you're seeing? Why do you see it? What angle are you coming from? Where are you coming from? I need to understand it. I need to get your train of thought, because that's what's going to build me. And that's how we create or build synergies. Yes, Lambert. Was there any other question? You're on mute, Lambert.
Indicated to me. Says, yeah, no other person came on with any questions. But there's something which I really wanted you to touch on before we remember. We started off talking about the horoscope. It's such a popular thing, popular culture these days. Everybody's asking you is it your star or whatever they call that thing. And I said, oh yeah, what's your zodiac sign? I'm talking even about my 10-year-old daughter was asking me the other day, what's your zodiac sign? And I asked her, what do you know about zodiac sign? And what is all this about zodiac sign? And there's something about the stars aligning for you. And I remember listening to somebody say, if you are born in August, then the kind of women to date will be women who are born in December and women who are born in February. And I'm like, really? So my life is now controlled by the stars. And if it doesn't go that way, then everything is going to, again, they're talking about compatibility. What is your take on that?
So there are certain things I don't get into because I don't know enough about, but I can share the little that I know. Now I know that you are energy, I am energy. So my concept of me doesn't really exist. What we see here, this entity, is a vehicle. It is the substance. So this is one unit of me, which is it's a unit that is indivisible. I can't divide this any further than it already is. But when you go in, you realize there's a whole universe. Would you agree? Would you agree, Lambert? Let's come on, help me here. Let's have a conversation. All right. You're probably, and anyway, if you can hear me, you're on mute. So here's the analogy I'd like us to think about. Each of us. See yourself as one cell within your body. And if you were to represent that cell in your body, what would you see? Would you see you, or would you see a whole universe, call it even a multiverse? Take the liver cell and the heart cell. At their level, they see two separate continents, I am sure. And these two separate continents do two completely different things. If they are not careful, they can start a war against each other, thinking they are defending their integrity. Whereas what actually happens if the lungs start fighting the heart, the whole body crumbles. Now go further into that cell, into the molecules that make up your proteins, your carbohydrates, and your lipids, or your fat, or your fat, or your fats, your fat cells, or the fat. Go into those molecules, then go into the atoms. Take that atom, put it in an electron microscope. What do you see? You see 99.999% space, a nucleus, and a lot of space. And you've got some electrons in there as well. But these electrons are not localized, as quantum theory or quantum physics or quantum mechanics will tell you, that electrons only appear because we look for them. So if we focus and we're looking for an electron, a wave eventually condenses into this electron, and then we can see it, and then eventually it disappears. Hence, we have the wave and the particle theory of matter. So ultimately, we are just this field of energy that is this. So we are held together by a certain field of energy that has got polarity. And this polarity we can experience in different ways. We call it love. Two people who attract one another, opposites attracting. So they're drawn to each other. Magnets. If the two poles are the same, they repel. If they are opposite, then they attract. So there is, and we are energy at our core. And so the question is, clearly, when we are in alignment, we call it peace, because in that state of alignment, we are coherent, and there's a state of flow. We are at ease, we're in peace, and we call that harmony. When we are out of plaque and out of whack with self, we call it dis-ease or lack of ease. In this our contemporary space, we would refer to that as stress, duress, and distress, and that is the origin of all forms of disease. Which is why they'll tell you that those who are more immunocompromised are usually typically those who are under a lot of stress and or duress. So your diabetic is a very good example. Your diabetic is vulnerable in all different ways that you can think about. The body is in a constant state of stress because it can't manage insulin, depending on what kind of diabetes or what kind of diabetic the person is, type 1 or type 2. So that's a whole different ball game. We don't want to get in there, but it still comes down to this energy thing. And so in a state of stress, we've talked about this so many times, you're releasing cortisol and adrenaline. Adrenaline prepares you for flight, and for a fight because you're in a state of fright. Cortisol shuts down your immune system because you are preparing for survival. So all that you've got left is whatever immunity you had before you got into that state of mind and frame of mind. Now, once that immunity is depleted, then that's you done. So they will tell you, okay, if you're stressed, it's not good, especially with COVID lurking out there. You want to make sure that you're out there, you are running about, you are having a good time, and with exercise, having your vitamins, eating your 5 a day vegetables, and all of that, to ensure that your immunity is where it needs to be, so to speak. So let's plow this right back into this energy thing, because that's what we were talking about. So you would notice that by and large, you and I are just a field of energy that animates itself, that gets animated, it manifests into what we call BK and what we could call Lambert. Without that energy, we do not exist. So if you look at the grand scheme of things, there's a zero field energy as well that is responsible for the world we live in. Look at the flora, look at the fauna, the fauna, look at the landscapes, prairies, the rivers, hills, mountains, valleys, and all the beauty that is out there. The sea, the ocean, you've got a whole planet in the ocean. Life so beautiful, it's unbelievable. Now, when you look at all of that, you ask yourself, what is it that is responsible for it all? There is an intelligence, and that intelligence seeks to flow through us, to come alive through us. We get in the way every now and then. So when you talk about seasons, again, you will notice that for those who are widely read, who venture into other areas, something like Ayurveda or epigenetics. When you get into those areas, you look in those spaces, you realize that this self-organizing property engenders a power which I would call mind over body. So then the question I ask myself is, if we can actually determine who we become based on what we secrete, which is based off of what it is we are thinking. Because if I think fearful thoughts, then it's adrenaline and cortisol, which is not good for me. But at the same time, if I am out, doing bungee jumping or skydiving, I may release the same adrenaline and cortisol, but that is good for me. So my biochemistry is telling me the same story, but the effect on me is different. So we're right back to the field. So there is meaning which is by far bigger, deeper than what my biochemistry is telling, say, your GP, who looks at it and thinks, okay, let's fix this. But are they really fixing the problem, or are they exacerbating the problem? Is there a problem to be fixed? If it's just going to be that physical entity, my blood sample that they're looking at. So there is energy behind all of that. And that blood and the chemistry that we see is just there to sustain my physicality. But is my physicality who I am? Absolutely not. My physicality is the thing that allows me to move from point A to point B and to manifest who I am. And so when you look at the seasons, you will notice that people with particular predispositions to certain diseases will manifest the symptoms depending on the season. So something is happening there. Do I know what it is? I can't pretend to know. Do I understand it fully? I certainly don't. But is there definitely something there with that whole alignment and how we are configured and how we are wired? There's bound to be something, because we are part of that system. So if the seasons are changing and these seasonal changes are congruent with when we were born, because if you are in a particular environment, you kind of adapt to that environment, isn't it? So if you're born at a particular point in time, if you're born at a particular time, I'm not sure what is happening there, but I'm sure we will agree that, I don't know about you all, but my mother-in-law is Leo. And everybody I know of who's a Leo, we all exhibit certain characteristics. Slow to anger, we will take our time, we very long ropes. And so are these things, is it coincidence, or is it really something to tap into? Again, I don't know, so I'd rather not comment. But I just know that there are certain There are certain principles, there are certain concepts which are bigger than you and I. Horoscope is in the Bible. The three wise men saw the stars in the east. And okay, good. So now it's actually coming out. Marilyn says it's all in the Bible. So yes, and that's what it is. We are part of the universe, as it were. And this universe is a complex continuum, a complex dynamic of forces that come together through a field. I call it the unit, the 0 point field, which has a unifying force, and that is what holds the Earth, the solar system, the galaxies, the universe in place, and all the different and the planets in orbit. Are we part of that? We are. Are we separate from that? Absolutely not. So I guess it's a kind of worms. You're on mute, Lambert.
I have a problem with that, isn't it? Because we are all part of the universe, but then there's something called free choice. Okay, you can't tell me that the relationships are determined by the stars, and because the stars are aligned, therefore everything will be sweet. That's impossible.
Stop. Okay, no, one moment, Lambert. It's important that we don't hear something that has not been said.
Mm-hmm.
Did we say, now, if we're talking about certain predispositions, right? That is one thing. Now, how we use those predispositions will be something completely different. It's not every, so let's say we both come with certain characteristics and certain tendencies, right? I'm sure you would agree with me that the way you will use those characteristics, those abilities, gifts, talents, and capabilities will be different from the way the next person would use them, based on the way you look at life, based on what you define as pain and what you define as pleasure, based on how ambitious you are and what it is that your ambition, what it is that feeds your ambition and what it is that drives it. Is it empowerment, or is it greed? So again, those are some of the things that we may want to look at. Moving away from, okay, so when you talk about the whole compatibility thing, again, like I said, I really wouldn't know. But if you're going to hedge your bets and you know that, okay, you're dealing, these are people who can be bossy, and you like people who are generally bossy. That's not a very good example, is it?
No, again, I get the point you're making, that if you understand that general characteristics of a particular group are these, and these are the characteristics you like, you may want to go in for that, isn't it? Because
you may want to explore. Yeah, you may want to explore that. Does it? Yeah. If it turns out to be that, great. But so where I agree with you is anything that we adopt, embrace blindly, without actually taking the time to explore, to engage, to relate, and to ensure that whatever it is we thought we saw and or suspected is what it is. So look at personality types, for instance.
The Enneagram.
The Enneagram, it is just an extension of the exact same conversation. What is it a direct function of? It is a direct function of people's environments. So nurture as opposed to nature per se. Okay, there's an element of nature, we don't know how much, but it's a lot about nurture, how we have adapted to our environments, and who we have become based on the configuration we've been subjected to by our environment. Is that a fair point?
Yes, of course, I agree with you.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, and don't forget that when we are born, so there are certain things that happen. We are formed in the womb, and even right in the womb prepares us for the world, depending on how our mothers see the world. So you will notice that if a child is in the womb and the mother is stressed throughout her pregnancy, whatever her biochemistry is, she will share with her baby. And while the baby may not know what's happening in the world, whatever it is she's going through and what she's feeling, that stress, that distress and duress, that's exactly what the baby will be feeling. So what does the baby do? The baby will be prepared for a hostile world because it comes out into life knowing that the world is a hostile place. And you will typically notice that kids who are born in that situation, stressful situations, they always tend to be good athletically, very good runners. It could be any kind of stress or duress. They tend to be good runners, and their the occipital whatever usually is more usually more prominent because that's where your survival. That's where the whole survival thing occurs. Whereas if you have a child who is born, so a mother who has a very peaceful pregnancy, all 9 months, obviously will be releasing the feel-good hormones. So that child in the womb already, based on its biochemistry or the biochemistry that the mother exchanges with it, it comes into the world knowing that it's a safe place. And usually you would notice that these kids, they're more intellectual, prominent foreheads, usually typically. And it's amazing how it usually plays out because they tend to survive more with their intellect. Whereas those who go through turbulent or tumultuous pregnancies tend to be more street smart. And you begin to wonder, is that coincidence? No, it is not. You see, when we come out and we learn to talk, we can articulate, we can metabolize our environment and give it meaning. But that same environment we inherit from our parents through our biochemistry, and that shapes us. It determines what parts of our bodies develop and how they develop to adapt to the environment that we will be born into. So there's a lot of complexity. I went into so much depth. I did not plan to go into this level of depth, but I just went in to show that it's a very complex dynamic, but it is also true that we are our own programming. You talked about free will. Yes, we are our own programming. And based on how we see, perceive, and metabolize our environment, we can override, we can determine what genes we express and what genes we shut down, pretty much. You're on mute, Lambert.
The focus of our conversation is about, these relationships and whether the question of compatibility. So again, our conclusion is it depends on what you're talking about, isn't it? There really are no people who are programmed to be incompatible with others. It's work in progress. Relationships are, when people start talking about the incompatibility, it means if you drill it down, that is not what they're actually talking about. They're talking about something completely different. So how do we deal with these things in relationships? How do we deal with the differences that we have in our relationships, where all of a sudden we started off from a point of these are things that we like and we have maybe accomplished them, and now all of a sudden we start highlighting the differences. We start moving away. I love the image you use, the two coming together like that. These two are the same. The back, isn't it? We are coming together. We're two different. They're coming together because we're seeing a common point. But then in seeing the commonality, we are not destroying the differences. So the problems start coming when people start highlighting the differences and accentuating the differences to show that they are completely different and therefore it's not working. And so that is when the light bulb should go up or should go off that, hey, you are now insisting on differences where we should be looking for that complementarity. How do you deal? Because it's not an easy process. It's not easy just to all of a sudden. I mean, I love the question the gentleman asked. How comes we have been together for 20 years, all of a sudden compatible? That's not true, isn't it? How do we deal with that?
Yes, so the way we deal with any problem is to go back and look at the epidemiology, see how we got to the point where we actually, how the problem came about. Because with awareness, once we become aware of something, then we know what to look for. We know how to interpret the things that we feel when we get into a relationship. So awareness is just that, what we see, what we perceive. And for this, we depend on our five senses. And for meaning, we depend on our experiences, the experiences we've had in the past. Now, our past is a very limited reference because opportunity lies in that which is unknown. So if we're going to take everything and measure it against an experience that we had in the past, then all we're doing is reliving our past. And this is how we bring our baggage into a relationship, because we see something that reminds us of our past and we react to it instead of responding, instead of realizing that, no, hang on a minute, I'm dealing with somebody who loves me. And while back there, I may have been dealing with someone who was looking to exploit me. Someone who loves you will do the same thing that someone who exploited you did, but they're both doing it with different intents, for different intents and purposes, and they will all have different reasons. So the outcomes will be completely different. But if you react instead of responding, then you put that person off. They start feeling unloved, and then they eventually do exactly what it is you were afraid of. We talked about the epidemiology. How did you get to a point where you started feeling this? When two people start coming together, they have a lot in common, and they start enjoying what they have in common. What is the natural thing? They get closer, and they get closer, and they get closer. Beyond a certain threshold, you will start bringing out my insecurities. Because the closer you come, the more I can see you, the more I can appreciate you, the more of your weaknesses I get exposed to. The question is, how do these weaknesses of yours trigger me? If in getting close, we were focusing on the important things and not just the ephemerals, not just the trivial things, not just the fun side of life, if we're equally looking at really building our values, then we each become less of a threat to each other because we're tuned in to each other. But if we're only focusing on the niceties, if we're focusing on the ephemerals, then the closer we get, the more we start becoming a tone to each other, because it doesn't matter what happens. Put two people in a room and one will hurt the other. Intentionally or unintentionally, it will happen. It's not something that you choose to do. I hurt my wife all the time. She hurts me all the time. We have to talk about it. This thing that you did, hey, this is how it made me feel. Baby, I don't like this thing that you do. You always tell me, you always ask me to tell you when you're being really annoying. I can tell you right now, you're being extremely annoying. Then I put my hands up. I'm like, okay. Let's take care of this. But it has to be done in a proactive manner. There are no shortcuts. There are absolutely no shortcuts if you do not prepare for it. In my case, I would tell my spouse, if I do something that is out of plaque and out of whack, tell me there and then, please. Don't wait for the right moment. I can be articulate, which means if you wait for the right moment, whatever it is you thought you were dealing with, you're not dealing with. In my right senses, I would never do what I did to you. Do we all agree? When I'm in my right senses, everything is going, everything is fine, honky dory. I'm in a good place, great mental space. I'm an angel. I'm the next thing after. There's the Trinity. God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, and there's me. But put me in shaky ground where there's an area which is fraught with uncertainty and I'm not sure of myself. I don't know whether I'm going or I'm coming. Then my fuse is short. And that is where learning and growth happens. So when I'm in that place and headspace, that's when you want to correct me. Otherwise, if you correct me when I'm in a very good place, the person you're trying to reach is out there in the Bahamas somewhere sipping gin and juice on the beach. Which means putting me back in that place where I feel threatened, and you will get that same person doing exactly what they did the last time. Then I'll apologize for it, and that routine continues. I'm sure this is where all the women say, Amen. Because we commit the same crimes and we apologize for them over and over and over again, and it never goes away. And at some point, they're like, oh, well, he doesn't mean it. He just says it. No, he does mean it. It is just, you get him to apologize at the time when you're dealing with the man you married, the man you loved. You're not dealing with his demons. Deal with the demons when they are present. And if you can reach him at that point, then you've started solving a problem. And it cuts both ways, obviously.
Very important point that you just made in terms of the fact that when we get closer, we become vulnerable. And so you're able to see the weaknesses of the other person, and the problem becomes whether you want to deal with them or not. Very important. And the problem, as we indicated before, is, how do you feel in the face of my insecurities? And it's for the same reason that, if I may put it in very banal terms, your spouse is the only person in front of whom you can be naked and feel comfortable without being, okay, I'm not shy, I'm not, you can do that. The only other people are going to be maybe doctors and all that, which is obvious. But that transparency, whereby you are so transparent in front of your spouse without feeling the need to cover anything, and yet your spouse accepts you, it's an image in every relationship that would be able to help us to say, I accept what I'm seeing in front of me, I can deal with it. And it's not just the physical transparency, it's also the other vulnerabilities that come with it. And I think the big part of the problems that we face, we have not been able to see that our closeness either frightens the other person, challenges the other person, and they're not able to deal with our vulnerabilities. And we ourselves, because we are talking as men, that ego thing comes up, and you're, why you're not able to, again, transcending ourselves to see that, hey, the other is accepting us for who we are, but that doesn't mean that they will just go ahead and tolerate everything without challenging us to say, this one makes me uncomfortable.
Amen to that.
And so I believe that as a man, to be able to sustain these relationships, and I mean, we can talk about it, about this thing about the man is the, I don't want to say a stronger sex or weaker sex, because that doesn't make any sense to me personally. But I believe that we have to come to a point of realization whereby we, in that vulnerability, know that we stand a risk of crushing the other person because of our vulnerability. And therefore give the other person the opportunity to accept the vulnerability and be able to move on. Because you two are not perfect. And we talked about this before in our conversations. When somebody's pointing out something, that how they feel about something you did, and then you go ahead, but you did this other thing the other day, isn't it? So why is it that it's only my own that you are doing that? And that whole thing then spirals out of control. I mean, I've said too many things here. I wanted to come back to something because, again, when I posted the link to this on different fora, one person said something that compatibility is when you are from Bafut and your wife is from Bafut. It sounds ridiculous, but it points to something which I want us to address. So compatibility now is taken in terms of you come from the same tribe, therefore you become compatible. You share the same religion, therefore you become compatible. Maybe you are the same education level, isn't it? You become compatible. These are issues that break marriages, break
Yeah.
relationships,
Yes.
because the other person is looking at it and saying, I'm not a Catholic after all. And this is years down the road, isn't it? All of a sudden, you no longer want to do anything Catholic because of that difference. Compatibility in terms of the differences that we share from tribe, educational status. Again, that's a big one. Again, like education, we take it for granted, but it's a big one. And then religion. How do you handle those?
Yes. So what you do, we talked about perception and we talked about perspective.
Mm.
They are right. We just have one small tiny piece of the puzzle. Because when someone says, "Oh, you come from Bafut and she comes from Bafut," what has he said? You share the same culture, which I'm sure you would agree with me is important. So they've touched on a point, but they have just a small tiny piece of the puzzle. And if they confuse the map for the territory, or if they confuse that little tiny piece for the whole, then they are lost, and they are lost for life. Because all they were looking for, they will confuse their upbringing with bafootness. That's where we have a problem. So, what else was I going to say there? I was going to say something very important, which I just hope I have not forgotten. Yes, I was going to make an analogy with food. If you say it is not rice until you put pepper in it, again, pepper is just one ingredient. It's not rice if you put salt in it. Salt is just one ingredient. Then the question again is how much pepper? How much salt? So these are those generic statements that we make that are well meaning, but they intoxicate a relationship because they will put the next person off, especially that person who's from Bafut, who has no happy memories of Bafut. So you realize that we make statements which are well meaning. They mean absolutely nothing in and of themselves until you talk to that person, then you understand what it is they meant and where they were coming from. They're coming from a place of culture. And if we share the same culture, chances are we will have at least certain things in common. There will be certain things we can sit and talk about, certain things we can unite and relate around and about. And how can that be a bad thing? But if we're going to define our union based on that, and we know that there are barefoot people who will get divorced on a daily basis, how can you hang on to that and be blind to that little fact? So these are some of the things that we say, and they configure us subconsciously. We don't realize what it is we're saying. But because we have said them, because once you articulate something, the word becomes your bond, the word becomes your bone, and the word was made flesh. So it becomes your reality and it configures you in certain ways. Then you go on to make it pervade other areas of your life, and you will go on to make other alarming statements, inflammatory statements, which you will believe in because that's the way you're slowly wiring yourself. So you get little bits and pieces of the puzzle and you confuse them for the whole, and that becomes a recipe for your own disaster. Unless when you get into the relationship, the fact that you're in love knocks all of that out of the way, because that is what love will do to you. It will heal you of your iniquities and all those and the wisdom that is not exactly helping or serving you. That's why they say love is blind. And that is why I say love is what it is, because when you truly love, it doesn't matter what impurities you brought in that relationship, they will be refined and streamlined. They will burn out without an ounce of a doubt. It's only when we come into a situation and it is a bit of love, and a lot of fear, that is when those weaknesses take hold, because we hang on to them and we use them as excuses to subjugate and to kill the relationship.
Again, I think this follows the same trend when very often you talked about expectations, isn't it? One of the great killers in a relationship, what we expect. And that's because generally people think of some maybe excellent man that has been created somewhere, or a woman who has been put somewhere, and you just have to put that and make things happen. I believe too that a great number of relationships break just because of the expectations that we have.
Let's
And
look at it. Yep, sorry.
Yeah, most of the time, these expectations are not things that have been communicated to the other party, isn't it? Then all of a sudden, things start going south, and as usual, the other party is not saying it is because of this. They are using other things to point you to it, and if you are not sensitive enough, you don't see that.
Yes.
The issue of compatibility is not so much compatibility. It's because we have couched these things. We have put them in different categories. The kind of man I want to get married to. The day you see somebody who resembles that, then you said it at the beginning. You want to get married to a man because of a certain insecurity, so you want to feel secure. Or you want to get married to a woman because of a certain insecurity. You want to feel secure, but that is not what you are projecting. Energy follows thought, isn't it? The energy that you are exuding is following the expectations that you laid down, but that is not what you are telling the other person. You can't cook cocoa yams and then expect yams at the end, isn't it? And I think for most of us, it is important communication. It is important for these things to be clarified. It is important because, again, the reason why we have this show, most of these relationships are, they're in problems. Divorce is going up, distress, stress, depression, and all that. We need to pay a lot of attention to our relationships. We need to. It takes a lot of time and energy. We can't just presume that the magic is going to work. It takes a lot of energy. And that is why we too are taking this energy in order to say, hey, what is it? Sit down, look at yourself. Look at yourself. How can I fix it?
Yeah.
How can we then? Because again, like we have said throughout today, it's easy to point to the other person. But BK, I think 1 hour 30. You want us to wrap up? What?
It's fine.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to challenge our audience to ask a couple more questions, and I hope they do. But you mentioned expectations, and I want us to talk a bit about expectations. You will notice again that we throw words around and about that mean absolutely nothing, that really cover for something else. Why would I have expectations of you if I know that you're not perfect, and I know that it is part of me to help you grow, hold you accountable while I'm responsible for everything I do, think, and say? If I show up and I'm talking about expectations, what am I really saying behind that cover, behind the veneer of that self-righteousness? Because that's what it is. By and large, above all I'm saying is this is who you need to be for me to feel comfortable. Should I say that again?
Mm-hmm.
Expectations simply mean this is who you need to be for me to feel comfortable. If you're anything outside of this, I will not know how to deal with it. It'll cause me stress, duress, and distress. And it doesn't work. Because in this equation, I'm supposed to be happy. And my happiness is on you. I just translated what expectations are. And show me one person who doesn't mean what I just said when they say, oh, I expected her to be. Show me that person, and I'll show you someone who really, well, But that's what expectation really is hiding. I don't want to grow. You need to do all the growing for me to be okay. Better still, grow for both of us. I'll just stay put and I'll do me the way I'm used to doing me, because this is me, the way I'm used to me, and the way the whole world has accepted me. And that's not about to change. So a relationship is that thing that is going to take us to a place where we meet our boundaries, we meet the borders of our boundaries, and it will expose our insecurities. And it's for us to decide, okay, cool, it has brought up this insecurity. Am I going to deal with it, or am I going to turn it into, oh no? They bring up our vulnerabilities. And then it's for us to decide, am I going to deal with this vulnerability and come up higher and become a better person, much better person, and in fact, earn this woman's love and respect? Or am I going to turn it into an insecurity and make it her problem? Those are the only two. Those are the only two questions. Those are the only two options we have. Because, like you say, life's a choice, and it's always a yin or a yang. It's either light or dark. But we need both, by the way. We can't live without both. Whatever we call good or bad means absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things, because good and bad in the grand scheme of things just mean pain and pleasure by and large. The body is what feels pain. What we call painful is what we describe as bad. What we call pleasurable is what we describe as good generally. But then I'm sure you would agree with me, there's short-term gain, long-term pain, and short-term pain, long-term gain. And that is what really ultimately determines and defines good and all bad. And even in that case, you would realize that when you're doing good here, you think you're doing good, it is costing some people everything that they've got. And when and when bad is happening at times, it generates and engenders so much good. See how much good COVID has caused. How can we then turn around and say COVID was bad? It has killed people, that is true. But then it has exposed society for what it is. It has brought so many people together who found their philanthropic nature. It has gotten you and I on this platform. Without COVID and without lots of other things, I would not have believed in. I don't know that I would have taken this plunge into this crazy dream to fight depression by finding or empowering people in a way that they get to find fulfillment, so they don't have to go down the path of depression. Now, that is all thanks to COVID. So how can that be a bad thing? Okay, but then it's causing a lot of death and misery. How can that be a good thing? So is COVID bad or is COVID good? You catch my drift.
Absolutely.
So, yes, so that's pretty much what it is. And until we move away from this place and just look at life as, okay, good, we are all on a journey, and everything and everyone and anything that gets thrown at us is a teacher. Some teachers we will take with us throughout life. Others will come in for a season, then they will check out. We get to choose the ones that we want to keep, because they do play a role in that evolution, because they too are on our journey or on that entrance ramp, and they are not afraid of growing. And when you identify these kinds of people, they are the ones you want to gravitate towards. They are the ones you want on board your ship as passengers. They are the ones you want to run your ship from time to time in a co-partnership. They are the ones you want to travel with.
Great. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for sharing our platform with us. As always, mindsetboulevard.org.com. If you want to follow up with BK throughout the week, you want to go to Mindset Boulevard, you want to follow up. Again, we encourage as many people to sign up there. It's important. Many people want to follow up after this. They have personal questions. Go to that. Look it up on Facebook. You can look up the YouTube channel. And as always, you can reach out to me. BK, before we wrap up, you have any last words?
Yeah, no, I'll just say, obviously, we're looking to build a community There's a Facebook page currently. There is mine, which is Mindset Boulevard, and there's also Mindset Boulevard Limited, and then there is the lounge, which is Mindset Boulevard Lounge. I will always encourage people to go on there. The whole idea is to build a community of like-minded people where we can come in, have these conversations, exchange ideas, ask questions, grow and learn from each other. It's not a question of one person teaching anyone. While Lambert calls me Coach B, he knows how I feel about titles. See, because when we come into these engagements, it's really about empowering each other. There are no teachers, there are no students. It's a flat environment. We really just learn, get empowered, and we go out and we touch others so they too can be empowered, and there's a ripple effect. It's that cascading effect. That's what we're looking to grow. So if we can change people one conversation at a time, we eventually get to a place where people find themselves, can be themselves, embrace and accept themselves, love themselves, and guess what? Misery will start going out the window and depression will follow suit. That is me for tonight. Thanks again.
So thank you all very much. Next Monday is another date. We'll come up again to continue the topic on relationship. As always, join us. And BK is encouraging, me too, that please ask as many questions. When you rationalize compatibility, you reduce real relationship issues to lack of communication. Ms. Anko, I know you're just jumping on now. What do you mean by rationalize compatibility?
When you rationalize compatibility, you reduce real relationship issues to lack of communication. Yeah, and the challenge with this is we have thrown in so many words that can mean so many different things to so many different people, and so the conversation can go in so many different directions, and they will all be right and they will all be wrong. So, James, until we put this in context, it's very difficult to respond to what you just said, but we'll give it a try. So, you say when we rationalize compatibility, I guess the first question we would be asking is, what do you mean by rationalizing compatibility, and how did we rationalize compatibility? Because all we did was put compatibility into perspective. We made it clear that compatibility is not a word that can be taken at face value. Until you talk to the people involved, you would realize that they can be placed in so many different categories depending on what it is they carry as baggage, where it is they are in life, where it is they are going, how and to what extent they are prepared to drop their baggage and pick up and really go on that journey, and whether or not they get there. And then you say we reduce real relationship issues. And again, don't forget, when you talk about real relationship issues, they are all locked in what we describe as compatibility and the different kinds of incompatibility that we get to meet and greet when two people get into a relationship. All those different things that they experience and they ascribe to. So challenges that they experience, they don't talk about, they rather ascribe it to incompatibility, and they never get addressed. So you've actually, in your own question, put in the answer, because I'm taking exactly what you wrote and using it as an answer to the question that you just asked. So we reduce real relationship issues to lack of communication. Now, James, if you can give me a single example of a relationship issue that was not down to lack of communication, I would be I'd be pleasantly surprised. Because if it becomes an issue, it is because two people do not understand each other. And if two people do not understand each other, it's because one or both of them is not patient enough to sit at the table and have a conversation about and around what it is they are at loggerheads with, what it is they do not understand, and what the best way is moving forward. Not sure if that addresses everything, but I did the very best I could.
So again, James, I don't think we were rationalizing. We're giving it context, and we said here that what people actually refer to as compatibility or incompatibility, it is, about different issues. James has something. Is a person could give birth to a lady, he got another girl, and they have kids. What does that mean? So again, I think it's getting to the issue. Maybe if I if I understand James, explain. Let me not presume what you mean.
So a person could give birth with a lady, he got another girl, and they've kids. Okay.
Okay, I think he's saying maybe two of you are in a relationship, you are married, could not give birth, then he got another girl, and they have kids.
Did they agree so did these two people agree that was going to be the way forward to have kids? Could they have adopted it? Could they have done whatever else that both of them agreed to? See, because you've come right back to the whole concept of communication. One person who's in a union goes off, takes initiative, does something which will incite problems, and they don't think about the possible ramifications or repercussions of that action that they are taking. How does that fare? If they had communicated, would they have taken that action?
So BK, I think the point he's making is rather that you got married, you could not have kids because you were not compatible, maybe physically or otherwise. But then you left that relationship and maybe went to another girl, and both of you and now you have kids. So in one instance, he's saying the issue could be that you did not have kids because you were not compatible, and now you have kids with this other person because of compatibility.
Okay.
James, does that make sense? I mean, if that is what you meant. But again, bottom line is the compatibility we are talking about here is not in that sense of the inability to bring forth kids, isn't it? There are many reasons why people don't get kids. They don't have kids. There are many. I don't think it's as simple as not being compatible, isn't it? Because I don't know, that's physical compatibility. Okay. But I believe the issue we are addressing here is more the fact that people have been in a relationship, everything is working out well, they start having problems, and all of a sudden the other person says it's because we are not compatible. It could be they're not having kids because of incompatibility. It could. I don't know.
I would be hard pressed to see a scenario. I mean, if somebody is barren. Okay. He says yes, Lambert. So I guess the question, James, would be, how do we ascribe? So if someone has got unless you're saying for one person, family meant everything, but then I'm sure family would have meant everything to both people. So we're looking at somebody who has got a medical condition, so they can't have a baby, they can't have children because they have a medical condition. Can we really ascribe that to two people being incompatible because it is an illness?
No, BK, again, here you get to a situation where, so you are in a relationship with somebody, the man is being blamed that he cannot bring forth kids. Then he moves up and now gets married to another woman and then starts having kids. Same thing with the woman. It's claimed that she cannot bring forth kids. Then she goes over to some other person and then starts having kids. I don't think it's as simple as a problem of incompatibility. And again, this will be the exception to the conversations about problems in relationships. And again, it's not that we are not taking it away. That is foundational, isn't it? That could be the reason why the relationship is breaking for many people, isn't it? It could be just that we are not able to have kids, and then we go our separate ways and that. But we are looking at it more from the perspective of, hey, what happens? How do we define this incompatibility? What is the point? But I think except you want to chime in there because of,
Yes, I want to chime in.
come on.
Don't forget, we did talk about meeting needs. So we did talk about this whole concept of meeting needs, right? As part of the equation. So you have one person or two people who want to have kids, and things deteriorate, disintegrate and deteriorate, get to a point where they are blaming each other. So the part where they are blaming each other surely has nothing to do with the kids. It simply means they can't talk to each other in a way that can actually allow them look for tenable or sustainable solutions to the problems or the challenges that they're facing. Because the need that they're looking for is that of, oh, we want kids. I want a kid. The other one wants a kid. Now, one person leaves the union or the relationship goes and then manages to have kids. Did they go through the phase of discovering or figuring out who was the problem, or were they just accusing each other? And if they had known who was the problem, would they have had alternative ways of dealing with that particular issue? Or did they just start a fight, fall out, move away, and then each person did what they did, and then they realized that, oh, the person who was being blamed was not the one who actually had the problem? So where does the incompatibility come in? Do you see that there was a point where communication could have been had, which would have enhanced both parties? And even if they were to separate, they would have separated in a much better way than they did, because it is not what you do, it is how you do what you do, the reasons, and how you can back and defend them, and how each person feels after that process. See, because this is where I would say it is always important to focus on the bigger picture. Because when you get into somebody's life, the whole idea is you want to leave them better than they were before you met them, not worse in any way, shape, or form. So if you're leaving that person, and they feel worse than when you two got together, have you two really helped each other? Have you grown each other? And if you did not manage to grow each other, is it because you were incompatible? Or because there are certain things you could have done and you did not do? So it's a tricky one. And by that same token, I would be hard pressed to see a situation where two people go their separate ways. Like you just suggested, they may have, or one person may have every reason to have done what they did. The question is, are they leaving that situation and leaving the other person empowered? And if they did not, was it because of incompatibility or because they did not really communicate to grow each other?
So, James, you came in, you caught us at the end of it. So, I don't want to presume much, but again, we concluded we're going to take up. We'll start off our next week's conversation. I got you, BK. Communication can lessen the effects of the damage. That's what James is saying. Okay. Again, you got the point. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like for us to wrap up at this point. And the main message of today is about, what do you really mean when you talk about incompatibility? What is it? If you really sit down to examine it, it is about you're not communicating what the problem really is. You are using that as an escape. And BK said something about energy following thought, isn't it? What you think, that is, you pull all the energy towards that. Change your mindset, and the energy will follow you to wherever you want to. Thank you all. It's been great, 2 hours, and we hope you continue to learn. We would like to ask the audience to suggest to us topics that they are interested in. Just leave a message. You can send us, you can send me a text, call, or whatever, so that we can continue addressing issues that are relevant to the community. As always, I want to say thank you, BK. It's late for you. It's 8 p.m. my time. I think it's 1 a.m. your time. So I'll let you go to bed and rest. Thank you, and see you next week.
Pleasure. Thank you, Lambert.